In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Serie Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Hi Nikki, hi Serie Chronicles Tifosi members. How are you guys doing? I know it seems a little weird because we had a Champions League in the middle of the week and we haven't produced any voice notes for you, but we have a very good reason. Our producer Simon was unfortunately hospitalized and he wasn't about to take a laptop into the hospital to upload the voice notes that we would send. So excuse our break. We tried to obviously give you something in the beginning of the week, but the rest of the time we just wanted to wait until producer Simon is out. He is feeling healthy. He is back to writing to us. Hasn't yet said anything about Immobile. I'm expecting this message any minute now, as you would expect from a Roma fan. But otherwise, he did send over just a few of your messages. And Nikki, there's a lot that you asked me in the previous voice note, which I think now might be just a bit moot. Although I will say, you are the one person who made me rethink everything that I thought of Pioli. I certainly agree with what you said, especially about the 4 minutes, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I want to start off with Napoli because it was a 0-0 against Bologna, and I don't think we've spoken perhaps enough of them, and you asked me about Kvaratskhelia being upset with Rudi Garcia. And on this occasion, Nikki, it was Osimhen who was upset with Rudi Garcia. So certainly things are not going very well over in Naples at the moment. And we had a terrific message from Daniel Bartolini, who was talking about what is Rudi Garcia's sort of aims and objectives. Are they to give this team a new style of play, or to basically make them forget everything that they learned under Spalletti? That's the gist of it. Sorry, David, I don't have the message right now. But one thing I did write down is you asked, where are the biggest areas of concern? And this is a game that, it upset me a little bit because of what we've seen from Napoli last season and the brilliance that they created. To see them sort of being relegated to this team, I find it really strange. And I guess I want you to come back to me and answer me, or let's say disagree or agree with the views that I have. And also, Nikki, because we've talked about this a lot, so worth mentioning that this is the worst start to the season since 2015-16. They are 7th right now with 8 points, and that's 7 away from Inter, who are at the top of the table. 2 wins, a loss, and 2 draws. They managed to win against Braga in the Champions League, albeit with an own goal at the end. There doesn't seem to me much happiness going around at the camp, at least if you see the way that you know, when you look at sort of Kvaratskhelia, Osimhen and Lobotka being taken off, the stars, obviously, of the Scudetto last season, it is a bit disheartening. But I agree with you in many ways, Daniel, when you ask, like, you know, at the end of the day, we need to give this new coach a fair shout. But what is going on over here? And here's the thing, like, we can talk about a lot of things that I find quite surprising, to be honest with you, about this team. But what I don't seem to understand is that it's almost like Rudi Garcia has arrived like yesterday, and he's just, you know, sat down and they've given him a list of the players. He's never watched Napoli play, and he's been told, like, okay, Lobotka is a midfielder, you know, place him at the bottom of the midfield. And, you know, he'll do a job. Kvaratskhelia is your creator, sort of, you know, who plays out on the left. Sorry, I don't know my right from my left. Osimhen's your striker, you know, and it's like he's just been given a list of names and where they play and been told to come up with a strategy. And it seems to be a strategy that is a little based on, hey guys, show me how good you are and let's see what you can do on a personal level. Let me see the tricks and creativity that you can come up with. What can you do? Not rather how can we do all of this? What is our tactic? What is our objective and our collective style of play? It kind of seems like I'm going to put you on the pitch in the roles that you're supposed to be playing in and see what you can show me. It's almost like he hasn't had the time, or hasn't really seemed to taken the time to get to know what the superpowers of his players are. You know, what is it that makes Osimhen so great? And it's certainly not when he is being delivered these long balls from afar in hopes that he can do something against two defenders that are chasing him down. I mean, he had a great chance. Raspadori delivered that great ball forward, but he's alone. He's all alone. Whereas last year, it was Napoli that was constantly pushing up. He was surrounded by players all around him. They were circulating the ball with speed and aggressive in their nature, and always ferocious, always pushing up as far as possible. And he was a leader who really rejoiced in that. And then obviously allowed Kvaratskhelia, you know, it was always a different way. Like, you know, it's either Kvaratskhelia killing you or Osimhen or Lobotka coming forward and just directing play and delivering perfect passes or delivering the creativity that you needed. And this team just kind of looks set in a very like stop-start way. It's almost like there's a full stop after everything they do. And I feel like he doesn't understand who these players are yet. He doesn't understand what makes Osimhen tick. He doesn't understand what makes Lobotka one of the best midfielders. I mean, if they're not going to use Lobotka in the way that they used them last season and allow him to shine in that way, I will happily take him. I mean, for me, he's just like my favourite midfielder to watch. And watching him do this right now against Bologna it's a little bit shameful. So I don't know whether there's just not been enough time to really get to know these players enough or figure out a system that brings out the best of them. But long balls forward to Osimhen hurt my soul a bit. I don't really want to see that style of play. I want this side to, yes, it does kind of seem like they've been told to forget everything from last year and figure out a way of showing us what it is that they can do, and then Rudi Garcia will decide on what his tactics are. But I don't know what the plan is. I don't want to judge because it's only been 5 games, and so I hope that something will come out of this. But yeah, let's just say, like, I'm just looking at my notes now, and and what I say is, does he understand this team? And it's also like, it wasn't like a brilliant Bologna, right? Like, Bologna haven't been offensively great. Obviously, they've been somewhat weakened, and they lost Arnautovic. Poor Arnautovic and his injury at Inter. Thoughts and prayers with him. Bologna didn't even have a shot on goal until the 75th minute or so. So really, this was a great opportunity for Napoli to get there. And of course, I know there's a missed penalty. There were opportunities there. Kvaratskhelia was, somewhat back to being Kvaratskhelia. But I also find it really weird with the tweet that came out from De Laurentiis, which is Napoli, we start again from Bologna. Well done, everyone. It's like, are you watching this? Are you watching your team? Either way, it seems like the fans are really angry and they already want Garcia out. But let's see how this goes. Nikki, am I crazy when do you know what I'm talking about when I just kind of feel like Rudi Garcia is yet to really understand what this team's about, how to bring out the best of the players he has? It's kind of a little bit like, I'm just going to put you all in these positions because that's your position, so let's see what happens, rather than tell me who you like, rather than me watching you, having understood what are the things that you are so good at and what you excel at, and making sure that there's something within the side's style of play that can bring that out. It's almost like he's reduced them from, supermen to these mere mortals. Anyway, speaking of teams that have come in for criticism, I also want to talk a little bit about Milan. So Nikki, yes, I mean, look, obviously everything that you said is just absolutely spot on. When it comes to the derby, you're right. Pioli's comments were really weird. So hats off to you for just so eloquently putting into words what frustrated you about that and the mistakes that were committed by Pioli, and I understand that. I guess my point is, and it's one that still stands, I do agree with Pioli when he says there's just excessive negativity and criticism being aimed at the club right now. And it's almost like, it kind of just reminds me a little bit of watching the Americans on, I don't know which show it was at the time, who were saying, gosh, is this the Milan of Baresi and Maldini, can't score a goal? This was, their first year in the Champions League. And I'm like, you do realise there's a big difference between that Milan and this one, right? It's as if just because they're back in the Champions League, they're back to being the Baresi side. I just feel like buying a lot of players and spending money doesn't equate to brilliance straight away. If anything, it equates to, we need to give this team time. And mistakes were made, poor decisions were made, especially tactical ones against Inter. And of course, that had an effect that it somewhat could have really affected their confidence. I saw it more in the match that they played against Verona than perhaps Newcastle, because they created so many opportunities against Newcastle. Honestly, if you played that game in any other day, they would have scored a goal, at least one. They dominated that game. They had tons of chances, 25 shots on goal. And it's really remarkable that they didn't manage to somehow pierce that Newcastle defence. I didn't think that Tonali played the game of his life. I didn't think Newcastle were brilliant. But I do think that the amounts of blocks and how much they threw themselves into making sure they kept a clean sheet was admirable for players who are not experienced at this level in the Champions League, for their first game and for their debut in the Champions League, from certain players, that is. It's a difficult ground to come to, and I think that they did the best they did, and they walked away with a point. But Milan are also very unlucky to not have turned that into something more tangible, all of their efforts. But I do also think that, there's been excessive criticism of the side to try to keep up with Inter. And I just think that it's very difficult to look at a team that has lost a lot of main points, whether that be on the pitch and even off it. We have a new management and an entirely new team. And for people to be wondering why they're not winning every single game right now, it kind of disturbs me. And it's not even just winning every game. They won against Verona. And there's still so much criticism about the way the team played. Oh, look at it. It's so dependent on Leao. Oh, what do they have in attack? I mean, you bought all these players, but you missed a trick. And it's still good old Giroud and nobody else. And who else is going to attack? And what is this defense? And I agree with a lot of the stuff being said. Yes, it's true. We had mentioned that, you and I, lots of times in our conversations, just even as friends, that it's still Giroud, right? I mean, you've got Okafor, you've got other players, but they're not strikers, a pure number 9. Shouldn't that have been the investment that you made? But at the end of the day, there are other attackers. They will score goals. They were scoring lots of goals before that, I think on this occasion, they scored a goal and looked a little bit scared about how they were going to navigate through this, because obviously they've seen what's happened to them in the last 2 games, and they're a little bit fearful right now. And that is something that Pioli will have to work on. But do I think that Milan I don't know. I just kind of feel like the criticism is excessive. I think they will have their say when it comes to the Scudetto battle. I think that at the end of the day, they've got lots of players in midfield, and I always like midfield, because if you have a strong midfield, then you'll do well. But I also think you need time to embed. Like, Pulisic is not going to come out, score the goals that he did, and continue going like this. You know, he's not Haaland, right? So, like, let's chill out. And even when you buy new players, like, okay, let's look at the Galacticos, right? In 2009, they bought in what? Kaká, Ronaldo, Benzema, Xabi Alonso. They came second in the title race. They lost in the last 16 stage of the Champions League. They were knocked out by Lyon. It's difficult to embed great talent. And I'm talking about Ronaldo, Benzema, Xabi Alonso. Let alone, like, I mean, I know it's Reinders and Pulisic, but they're not, like chill out. People are like, chill out. Like, they did a great job against Newcastle. They did a good, you know, maybe not great, but they did a good job against Newcastle, and they were unlucky not to get a goal. They got a goal against Verona. To expect wins and excellent play with an entirely new team that lost Maldini, that lost their sporting director, and Massara, and Sandro Tonali, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, it's a lot of change, and it will take time for them to find the things that they can feel that they can depend on. Right now, it's Rafael Leao that they can feel they can depend on. And he's not ideally the man that you want to depend on, because he's not a consistent performer. He is always going to be that guy who gives you enjoyment and pleasure and potentially goals, well, a lot of goals, but also moments in which he will switch off, because that's just who he is, and that's what we've seen from him for a long time now. And we keep hoping for more, and there's always going to be moments where we are then disappointed. I hope that will change. He is still young, obviously. He is the captain, but again, it's like he gets that goal, and does he then give us the best of Leao? And what I mean by that is a disciplined performance rather than one where he's trying to have fun. I thought it was interesting, actually, with what Enrico Sacchi said. Let me just read this to you. Leao scored a nice goal, but today Milan exists mainly for the Portuguese winger, and this is the limit. Leao, with his way of being on the pitch, with the lack of tracking back, with his lack of participation in the work of the group, is what doesn't allow you to become a collective. And I don't know, I agree with that. And you know how I feel about some of the stuff that Sacchi says. You know, he is that guy, right? He's not the guy that's going to track back and try to help you out. So does he always play for the team, or does he play for himself a little bit? And I think that's the question mark that we have over this great talent, because we know he's a great talent. It's about the continuity that makes the difference, especially now when Milan need to find the dependable sources within this team. And right now, the goals are coming from Leao and Giroud, and they're both exhausted. And it's only 5 games in, 6 games if you consider the Champions League as well. So they're going to have to rotate. And who can genuinely take their place up front right now? Because it's too early to see the best of Chukwueze, and we know he's a great talent. It's too early to get Reinders to perform with such consistency that you need. And there are injury problems as well. So anyway, I've already spoken for 16 minutes. I wanted to have a whole go at Juventus, or not goal, but you know what, I'm not wanting to criticize them too much, but I wanted to talk about Lecce winning again. I love Lecce. I love them. Third in the table. What a brilliant performance from them. But anyway, Nikki, tell me what you think of Napoli, and come back to me with anything you want to talk about. And ciao.
Oh my goodness, Collie, I've had a day. Monday is always a day for me. Every week, I'm just like, okay, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. And I'm trying to record this voice note now, or this video postcard for everyone. Well, my dog is now like, okay, she's done. When is she coming to play with me? When is it time to stop working and do all this stuff? So I'm going to try and stay focused on the football. I have so many things that I was interested to come back to you on. I was actually at Arsenal this weekend for the derby, and there's lots to say about that, which people don't want to hear because this is a Serie A Chronicles podcast and not the Premier League podcast. But I was just thinking about it when we were talking about reactions and overreactions, and you were talking about some of the sort of knee-jerk stuff to come out. You were talking about it in the context of Milan and their start to the season, but I was thinking about it even it crossed my mind even in the context of Napoli this weekend, because just to say the Arsenal context so that my thought makes sense, obviously Arsenal drew 2-2 with Tottenham, and there's been all this sort of like big picture discussion of like, oh, well, this means this means that. Oh, clearly Arteta's getting things wrong. Clearly Ange has done these things right. And actually, like most of it, I agree with. I think that Tottenham were really good this weekend. I think Ange Postecoglou is doing an incredible job there. But I did think to myself, how different is this conversation if Jorginho doesn't just get completely lost on the ball when Arsenal have just gone 2-1 up and gift an equaliser to Tottenham, right? It's things that happen on a football pitch that aren't really part of some great narrative of the game. They're individual people making mistakes. And it just crossed my mind in the context of Serie A, because I was thinking that, and then I was watching back over this morning the highlights of Napoli's draw with Bologna, and I think that everything that is going to get said about Napoli not playing that well under Rudi Garcia, about doubts about whether he was the right person to appoint Spalletti, I agree with like all of it, like I really do. But at the same time, in the 4th minute, Osimhen hits the post. And if Osimhen's shot that, you know, could just roll a few inches the other way and go in, do we have a completely different conversation this morning about Napoli? Because it was a real fine margins miss, right? And in fact, later in that game, of course, there's a penalty as well, which if he scores that, thing's different. But I think that's a separate conversation, because missing penalties is like in the Napoli DNA at this point. I don't know what to say about it. I remember having so many conversations with Emina about Insigne, and you, I think, certainly really blamed a lot on Insigne's mentality and not being strong enough in certain moments. But so far this season, Napoli have missed 2 out of 3, and Insigne is a distant memory. So that's Osimhen's missed one and Raspadori's missed one. So good footballers who aren't Lorenzo Insigne are still missing penalties at Napoli. So, but it crossed my mind, that thought anyway, about I don't know, this sort of idea that all of our stories get written afterwards, because yes, if Osimhen's shot goes in the 4th minute, maybe we're not talking about them failing to win any of their last 3 games in Serie A. Maybe we're sort of still got some doubts about them, but we're not quite at this point that we're now at. Because of course the biggest talking point out of that game is, as you highlighted, Victor Osimhen going off and having a go at Rudi Garcia. And I think this is something to focus on, something that's important, because actually it's not just that Osimhen's angry about being substituted in the 87th minute of a game. I think that's normal. I think you expect that from a very competitive player and who wants to win a game when it's in the balance. I think it's the things he was reacting to that was sort of picked up, that he's clearly saying, put 2 strikers on. There should be 2 strikers on. And clearly that's partly about him, right? He wants to stay on and have Simeone come on with him and chase that game with both of them on the pitch up front together. But it also just is a real direct challenge to the manager. It's saying you don't know how to get your team right in the 87th minute of a game. Why are you not putting 2 strikers on? Why are we not doing this tactically differently to what you're doing? And again, in isolation, you might say, well, shrug, but it's not in isolation. It's on a team that now we tie into has failed to win its last 3 games, that has a new manager who was already a questioned appointment right from the beginning. And it just sort of, and it combines with the performances, because it's not just the results, it's the performances on the pitch. And you talked about some of this, Mina, I don't need to go back over it. But in terms of the not using the Botka well and just sort of playing these hopeful balls to Osimhen, which was always plan B for Spalletti's Napoli, was just play it long to Osimhen. It's a pretty strong plan B, but if it's your whole plan, it is a lot weaker. But yeah, the sort of combining those things with this very direct challenge to the manager saying, you're wrong, you should have 2 strikers on the pitch. That really is an alarm bell moment for me. And I think I was already concerned for them, but that has definitely taken it up a notch. It feels like, even though Osimhen did apologise next day and came in and said sorry, it feels like a real, is this situation under control? And maybe it isn't. So definitely some worries for Napoli. I feel like there were so many things that you got to. I mean, when you brought up Rudi Garcia, Mina, I mean, you said it and then you sort of called it out yourself. You're saying Rudi Garcia, well, I did agree with him about Rafael Leao and not tracking back. And look, Mina, I don't disagree with you, but I wrote a column about, oh God, days ago, I wrote a column about a couple of weeks ago, Christian Pulisic, and I wrote in there like all of the different reactions that the media have had to Pulisic, and was saying, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. Arrigo Sacchi said that Christian Pulisic needs to track back more, but Arrigo Sacchi says that about everybody. And he does. He said it about Pulisic, he says it about Leao, he says it about everybody. So I love Sacchi. He does sometimes say some very perceptive things. He's obviously a brilliant football tactician who has forgotten more about football than I've ever known. Clearly a brilliant, one of the greatest managers ever. But his columns are a bit eye-rolly sometimes, I would say. So I don't know that I feel strongly on Arrigo Sacchi's opinion on Leao. And look, I think Milan are ticking along. I think the real problem for Milan is not even what Milan are doing right now. I think it's too early in the season to be worried about Milan. I think they're getting enough results and they're showing enough growth for me to feel like, okay, well, you've got a full season to grow into this. The worry for Milan is just that Inter might be out of sight by the time anyone else gets up to speed, because Inter have won 5 games out of 5, because they've, I think even more than the 5 games out of 5, it's the 1 goal conceded. The 14 goals scored are nice too, by the way, but 1 goal conceded is so different. When you think about Inter last season, when they lost 12 games, a huge part of it was for a big part of the season, they just looked so vulnerable. They were conceding goals all the time they didn't need to. And if that's been ironed out, then I think they're, with Napoli being where they are, then Inter become clear favourites for the league title. I feel like I'm talking about all these games, Napoli, Milan, Inter. Inter's 1-0 win over Empoli. These aren't the interesting games of the weekend, are they? None of these games are particularly sort of exciting games. Di Marco's goal was great. He's brilliant. Things we already knew. Inter are very good. Empoli are terrible. The first team ever in Serie A to not only lose its first 5 games, but fail to score in any of them. That's never happened before. So big problems for Empoli, who of course have already changed manager this season. I think the interesting games for me this weekend were the Juventus game, obviously 4-2 with Sassuolo. And I'll go here again and say I don't think it's about overreacting to this. I don't think we need to look at this and go, oh, well, therefore throw everything out with the bathwater, because it was a ridiculous game of football. I mean, Szczęsny concedes that first goal that's just an absolute clanger, letting the ball go through him. Sure, it's a bit windy and wet on the shot from Loriente, but you can't let that goal in as goalkeeper. You simply can't. I don't even mean as a top-flight goalkeeper. Professional goalkeepers can't let that goal in. Sort of redeemed himself with a nice save later, but you really just had Federico Chiesa being brilliant for Juventus at one end. And other than that, I thought Sassuolo was a better team, deserved to win, created those chances. Berardi obviously scores a brilliant goal. 100% should be sent off in the second half. So when I say they deserve to win, maybe not, because if he goes off for a red card for that challenge on Bremer at the start of the second half, which he should, then maybe this whole game is different. So that context needs to be there. But just going off what we did get with 11 against 11, I thought Sassuolo were the better team. But at the same time, how much do we learn from that? Well, we learn that I think there's some interesting things happening under Dionisi at Sassuolo. I think they're playing a very exciting football. And I think there's some players there who in that way that Sassuolo have for years, frankly, have got the skills to upset and knock off big teams like this. I think Berardi at 29, we know what he can do, and sometimes it's this, but also Loriente has really been dangerous and impressive, and I thought he was probably the standout of this game even more than Berardi was. And so Sassuolo are a good team. Federico Chiesa is the best thing about Juventus. These aren't new discoveries. I think that the fact this game ends 4-2, as I was starting to say at the beginning and then got sidetracked by my own thoughts. Yes, Szczęsny's goal, that's a ridiculous goal. Federico Gatti's own goal is going to be one of the sort of funnier things that happens all season, because it's ridiculous. It's a no-look pass into his own goal. But it's not, actually, as Allegri said at the end, it's not why they lost. They were already 3-2 down at that point. I think what was interesting in this game, actually, sort of as takeaway observations that mean something to me, is that some of the things that Juventus have done well this season, they did well again in this game. And a lot of that is the play through Chiesa. They're playing much faster going forward. They've got an energy and a zip to them that hasn't always been there. And I think that's a really positive development. I thought Weston McKennie was good again at right wing back. I really am liking McKennie this season. And I think that some of the things that were slightly masked flaws so far this season were slightly more exposed. I think Juventus, despite playing with that slightly higher energy and more intent up front, are still sitting in a really low block a lot of the time, and they're not controlling games in the middle of the pitch. They are inviting opponents on and then just exploiting that with how they go forward. And I think I'm not sure they're good enough at defending right now for the low block they're sitting in. And so they're neither getting great defending out of that, nor are they getting positional control. And so you can get a chaotic game like this where they aren't really exerting control at any part of the pitch, but they're still dangerous because they are now dangerous going forward. The wild card in amongst all this is, as always, Dusan Vlahovic. Vlahovic has played quite well this season. He scored some good goals, but he's still being asked to play with his back to goal a lot, and nothing has changed in that regard. I don't think he has suddenly become a good striker with his back to goal. I don't think that's his greatest strength. And I think the good moments we've seen from him this season has been when he hasn't been being forced to play with his back to goal because Chiesa close to him. And perhaps this is the big dynamic change that Allegri's got right. But because Chiesa's playing close to him, it's allowing him to sometimes, even though the team is in that low block and the ball has to come forward, it doesn't always have to come forward through him. If it's going through the middle now, it can come forward through Chiesa, which means he doesn't always have to play on the turn, which it's just not the greatest part of Vlahovic's game, is it? He looks more comfortable turning onto his right foot than his left. He's not always as tight with that first touch as he could be. So I think that that part of things is an area that was highlighted in this game where perhaps you could have glossed over it in the Lazio game because they won because he scored great goals, or in other games this season. And of course, he did miss his one big chance in this game. And that's the other big question about Vlahovic is he ever going to be the consistent finisher that people want him to be? So I thought this was a game that was sort of part chaos. A lot of this game was just played in what my brother likes to call the chaos zone. I think it's a good way of putting it. There was a lot of this game was just played in the chaos zone where things were just happening. But I think there were still like lessons underpinning it all. And so, yeah, you didn't talk so much about Juventus in your voice now. I'll be interested to hear what you think about them. I don't know if we're going to come back to each other, but on these before or after the midweek games, because of course Juventus are playing again. They're on Tuesday, aren't they? I'm getting mixed up. Is it Tuesday or Wednesday? So probably I guess we might be doing the last part of this week's episodes after the midweek rounds. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that. I definitely would like to highlight some other teams as well with all that's going on. You mentioned Lecce. I mean, the fact they just keep winning under the Versa is incredible. This is going to be the first time, because it's Lecce against Juventus next, or Juventus against Lecce, and it's going to be the first time ever. It's a brilliant stat I saw on Twitter. A first time ever that Juventus play Lecce with Lecce higher up in the league standings than Juventus. Now, it's meaningless. We're 5 games into the season, but it's a fun stat, and it is a sort of a little thing that Lecce can celebrate. I think it's really fun watching Lecce at the moment. They're playing fun football, and look, they got some things went their way this weekend. Obviously, Genoa were down to 10 men from quite early on, but that attack is working. Almquist is still dangerous. Kristovic is dangerous. But another goal just from Udin, who's not played a single game this season, comes off the bench, and another goal from a sub. Daversa just seems to be living in that charmed moment where whatever he does, whatever he touches, it goes right. And it's suddenly put a lot onto that game, Lecce against Juventus. So I'm curious to see how that goes. The other team I really want to talk about, I've already gone 15 minutes. I just start talking and suddenly the time has gone. Hi, Ross. Ross is on camera for the end of the voice note. I told you he wants my attention. Lazio, Mina, I'd really like to hear what you make of this Lazio situation. They failed to win again. They've got 4 points from 5 games. At the end of the game, Claudio Lotito outside the changing room heard screaming at Maurizio Sarri for not bringing on Tati Castellanos, the summer signing. And I think there's got to be a story there. I mean, first of all, about why he isn't getting Castellanos on more, because clearly the club has invested in him. But is that relationship between Lotito and Sarri in jeopardy? Lotito insisting the team goes into retiro before their game in midweek. All super interesting stuff going on. I'd love to talk about it more, but I won't, because these things run too long and I'm running too long. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Lazio as well, Mina, perhaps after the midweek round.
Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.